Hey adapters, I'm Doug Parsons. I'm a partner at Cimpatico Studios where we live stream conversations about complex business and social challenges with professionals like yourself who are working on the same issues. Our shows are live streamed in front of a global audience of your professional peers on Cimpatico.tv. I'm building a new type of online community for professionals like yourself on the Climate Adaptation channel. If you're a regular listener of my America Adapts podcast, I think you'll find that we're taking our conversations about important problems, policies, and solutions to the next level here. And if you're interested in being a guest, we'd love to hear from you. And now join us for this latest episode. Hey adapters, today our guest is Rozina Kanchwala. Rozina is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager at Clean Energy Leadership Institute in Washington, D.C. She's also founder of Ecologic, a nonprofit that provides people with practical tools to address the climate crisis. Rozina writes in her personal time, including the play Love in the Time of Climate Change. Rozina will share a glimpse of her semi-autobiographical play, which is based on a woman's struggle with solastalgia, or climate anxiety, and her adventure through modern dating apps. She shares a message of love and hope while inspiring her audience to take climate action. Hey, Rozina, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, so this is going to be very interesting, I think, for a lot of people. But first off, I'm checking in with folks. What's going on with COVID-19 with you? How's that impacting your job and what you're doing?
Yeah, the world definitely changed quickly, and so did my job situation. But what it did was it really gave me time to pause and think about what I really want to be focusing on. And as a result, I decided to go all in on Ecologic, which we'll talk about, I think. And so just trying to stay positive. Sometimes it feels like life is one video call after the other. So definitely try and get outside from time to time to get my vitamin D, but just trying to stay hopeful and grateful for the things that I do have. So.
Well, okay. Well, then let's transition into that. What is Ecologic?
Yeah, so Ecologic is a nonprofit that I started. And it's an idea that I've had for a really long time, recognizing that there are a lot of people who are concerned about climate change, but don't necessarily know what to do when it comes to taking action. And so the idea behind it was to, provide environmental education that is inspiring, that is educational, and also providing people with practical solutions that they can take to actually take action. And so that's sort of what Ecologic is broadly.
All right. So I guess maybe expanding on that is, I haven't heard this term before, and I'm in the climate space and climate
Mhm.
grief and climate anxiety, but I hadn't heard of solastalgia. What's the origin of that definition? Has it been a word have been around for a while?
So that's a great question. I actually don't know the origin of the word at all, but as I was, writing the script for my play, Love in the Time of Climate Change, someone had mentioned this term to me, and I liked it because it is, even hearing you say it just now, solastalgia, when you were kind of saying it to introduce it. I think that's exactly how it was used in the play too, where people were like, "Solus, what?" And it sort of allowed me to kind of find humor in this word and in this theme that we were talking about. There was a Solastalgia support group meeting in the play, and it was through that we, introduced a cast of characters, including a climate denier who came there because he was confused and thought it was a salsa nostalgia group. So it was sort of that word that I found and I liked. And I mean, it is a real word to describe this feeling around climate anxiety. So I don't know the origins of the word, but it is a real word. And so it was kind of cool to be able to have a play that talked about this word and really provided space to have a conversation around climate grief.
All right, maybe you could I guess, expand on climate anxiety because I've heard different definitions of it depending on what sort of populations and where you kind of work. But what do you mean by climate anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So the more that I do talk to people who work in the environmental space, the more common it is that people have feelings of grief and anxiety just about the planet. And I think this extends to people's personal lives as well when they kind of think about, what decisions they want to make for themselves or the future. And I think this sort of feeling that a lot of people have but may not be able to articulate, because it is a little bit unique to have anxiety around climate change. People outside climate circles, obviously that seems so foreign, but people in climate circles, it's so common. And actually there are support group meetings for people who work in the climate space. So and then recently I also came across an article that talked about how certain frontline communities actually experience climate grief, at higher levels because they are directly impacted. Their lives are directly impacted by climate change. So it's not just like this existential feeling about what's happening in the world, it's what is happening in their personal lives. So, I think it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the one thing that I found is that it is a common thread among a lot of people.
Well, I think you've that's the thing. There's those kind of two different groups, and you're experiencing climate impacts, be an extreme storm event or flooding, and so that anxiety of going through that. But as you were sort of describing the first example, it's just you're working in that space, or you just generally follow that space, and it's a different kind of anxiety. I would imagine treatments and thinking about it are going to be two different things, though, right? Are you seeing that kind of play out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know specifically about like treatments, but what I do know is the importance of community. So that was sort of a theme that also came through from the play where, it was sort of around this one woman's journey with dealing with solastalgia and finding this support group. And so really finding community. And I think that that is just so important, something I've learned in my personal life. And just people who generally work in social justice or other activists. It's really important to have community and to feel like you're part of a broader movement. So, I don't know much about treatment. I mean, it's funny that you asked because there was a character in the play actually that was sort of representing big pharma and sort of kind of wanting to feed people these pills all the time, and it was sort of like it was a comical character, but so yeah, I mean, for me, I do think that community is just really important for those who kind of have these feelings, whether it's around climate or not.
And treatment was not the appropriate word. Support. I don't think we're yet at. Maybe it's something that becomes a medical condition, but no, that wasn't the appropriate, I think, word to use there. Have you ever run into the podcast No Place Like Home? Have you heard of them?
No, I haven't. I'll have to
It's
check it
probably right up your alley. The two hosts, one's from Sierra Club and the other one kind of works, but it's like I think their motto is all the climate feels, and they really dig into this issue. So anyway, I think you would
interesting.
probably be
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
a great guest. I think they'd love to hear about your play. All right, so the play itself, Love in the Time of Climate Change, obviously a very clever use of the words of from the original book. But tell us about that. What's I guess the plot, or what do you want to share with that without giving too much away?
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea, so let's see, I guess I can start with sort of the idea behind it. It was really after the 2016 election, and I think like a lot of people, I was just sort of, horrified and thought it was game over for the planet. And I was talking to a friend of mine, just sort of expressing my despair. And, she totally got it and understood, but she is an immigrant. She's a DACA recipient. And so for her, while that is a problem, her immediate concern was sort of that she thought she was going to get deported under the current administration. And so we were sort of just kind of talking about all the world's problems and then spiraling and talking about also our dating lives. And we were single women living in DC at the time. And so just sort of the disasters of the world and then the disasters of modern dating. And kind of came up with the title Love in the Time of Climate Change, which, as you said, is, kind of a play on the title of the book, Love in the Time of Cholera. And it was just a great title. And a friend suggested that I write a play. And I had never written a play before. So I was kind of like, I don't know the first thing about writing a play. But It was sort of like thinking about climate change and immigration and how people don't always make a connection between those two, or climate change and health, or climate change and frontline communities. And so it was just, there was definitely something there. And so I came across a theater festival and submitted the idea and didn't have a script at the time, but got accepted into the got
No
accepted into
script.
the festival. Yeah, and then realized I had to come up with a script and a cast and do all the things. And so I decided to go for it. And, as you said, it was semi autobiographical. So a lot of the content just kind of came out of experience. And so, yeah, it really just told the story of a woman struggle, dealing with solastalgia and also dealing with modern dating. And through that, she was introduced to these other characters. So there was a climate refugee in the play. So kind of hearing that theme come through. And there was a climate activist, and there was this, new age yogi instructor that kind of facilitated the support group meeting. So it was, so that was sort of the idea behind it. That's sort of what the play was about. And it was just really exciting to watch it come to life.
Well, I like storytelling, and I'm just curious because obviously climate change is this big esoteric topic, and so to ground that into something, your play, okay, dating was a driver, and that's. But I mean, why did you kind of go with that angle? Did it just kind of give you great source material, or was there really a deeper symbolic reason for it?
That's a great question. And I mean, sort of in retrospect, I can like kind of put things together, but at the time it was just sort of like my story. And I wanted it to be funny. I think, as these are really big topics, and kind of talking about climate change and immigration and frontline communities and dating. Like, they're not funny topics, they're actually quite depressing. And so to be able to find humor in that, I think was just really fun. And yeah, so I knew I wanted it to be funny. And and that was also scary because I don't consider myself a comedian or anything, but it was sort of like these are, like, um I think these jokes are funny. And so kind of watching the play being performed every time, I almost like held my breath. I was like, oh, are they going to laugh? And it was just such a relief that people did laugh. And it kind of let me know that, these are universal feelings and experiences. And just so many people let me know how relatable so much of it was, whether they are a climate activist or whether they are married or whether they, like, so many, there was just something for a lot of people. And so it was really cool to see that it was so well received. And yeah, I think really having these characters kind of come to life was really important for me, because I think sometimes a lot of climate change education is a lot of like, well, this is how many parts per million there are in the atmosphere, and sort of like throwing numbers at people, which fine, maybe some people can relate to, but I sort of found that a lot of people can, really relate to things when you show them the human impact of climate change. And I think that's what the play was able to do.
Oh, I've got to just connect you. I'm having these flashbacks. I was in DC until about 2 years ago, and I worked for the climate change response program at the National Park Service. But a good friend of mine also did. Single woman in the climate space, and she was always talking about dating in DC and all that. So what you're saying here, I'm just like, oh, this is. And she does cultural adaptation. She would be a good connection for you. Who knows? Maybe some source material too. I'm sure she would
Yeah.
love to see the play too. But on that note, it was performed,
Mhm.
but at the moment there's not much production going on and shows going on. Is it the goal to have it performed somewhere else in the near future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the first time it was sort of just like an experiment, so we did it. And the second time we got really lucky, and it was accepted into another theater festival in February. So right before things sort of shut down, we were able to do two more performances. But as I said, it's just like the world has changed, and so it almost seems like the play's a little bit dated too. And so, it's like, if dating during quote unquote normal circumstances was hard, it's like dating during COVID. That's whole new play material right there. So I don't know. Like, I'm not sure if and even with the play itself, with sort of the climate change material, like, even that felt like it needed to be updated, because there was a scene where scrolling through Twitter and it's projected. And so the headlines are all just like headlines of climate change. And so, it just seems like there's always so much material that could be changed and adapted. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, when things start opening up, we'll see if there's an opportunity to perform it again. But I think we got really lucky that we were able to do another set of performances in February. And yeah, we'll see.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always other platforms. And are you familiar with cli-fi, climate fiction?
Yeah, I did come across that term recently. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this woman, Dr. Amy Brady, she's sort of like the cli-fi guru, and I'm sure she would love to, she has a newsletter and a platform, and I think this is just right up her alley. So I think the notion of that story, I think would there still be outside of it actually performing it. I encourage you definitely to keep finding new platforms to share it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so has the process with the play informed your work though? So you went through that, must have been just kind of fun, exciting. You write this, performing, people's response to it. What has it been? Did you get to kind of chat with those people?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I was just blown away at how well received it was. The first time it was at the Capitol Fringe Festival, and we just had, sold out shows every night. Initially, I was like, if we get 20 people to show up, that'll be great. And it was just like sold out show after sold out show, which was just really exciting. But I mean, people came up to me and were just so excited to talk because of how they felt like they could connect to certain parts of it. So that was really cool. I think people really appreciate it. So another thing that we, offered, I guess, is in addition to the play, there was a mention of the Energy Innovation Act in the play,
Hmm.
which is modeled off of an actual bill in Congress, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is championed by Citizens Climate Lobby. And so volunteers from Citizens Climate Lobby actually came to the play, and they were able to talk to audience members after the play and encouraged people to learn about the organization, but also write letters to send to their members of Congress. And so people, were able to take immediate action following the play. And I think people appreciated that because it's like, okay, they learned about something, they saw a bill being, played out in a play, and then it's like, oh, this is actually a real bill, and I can write this letter that will be delivered to my member of Congress. So I think that was really exciting for people to see and to let me know that they liked that. And so one thing that I really want to make sure I do with Ecologic is to provide those actual tangible solutions, and just recognizing that, people don't always have a ton of time. Some people may work in the field and some people may not, but they still want to do something. So meeting people where they are and providing those solutions to them. So yeah, we definitely got media coverage as well, which was exciting. And yeah, I mean, I think it just showed me that there's something that was really relatable and universal about it.
All right, so you wrote a piece about how the climate movement needs to embrace the Black Lives Matter movement. That's those two very big, important issues. What were you saying in that piece?
Yeah, yeah. So for years, environmental justice advocates have been telling us that Black and Brown communities, and in this case, Latinx and Indigenous communities, have been particularly affected by systemic racism and environmental injustices where polluting power plants are placed in those neighborhoods. So, that's just been ongoing for years. And then we see COVID, and we see the rates of who's most impacted by COVID, and it's those same communities. And it's not a coincidence. It really is. We talk about these pre-existing conditions. Well, if you unpack those pre-existing conditions, it's really clear. Well, where are these communities located? Well, they're located by these polluting power plants. Access to food and healthy produce, things like that. The history of redlining, all these things, right? So we see that. What environmental justice advocates have been telling us for years, we're seeing it play out through COVID. And then we see yet again another unarmed Black man dying at the hands of, being murdered at the hands of law enforcement. And his last words are literally, "I can't breathe." And so it's just impossible to ignore this struggle, which a lot of people have written about. when they're saying I can't breathe and, dying at the hands of police officers, and then the environmental justice movement really advocating for clean air so people can breathe, just that parallel struggle is just so hard to ignore. And so one thing that the environmental movement needs to do is really reckon with its racist past, which it was. I mean, they limited membership to white people and prioritized protecting wilderness areas, which were largely for the enjoyment of white people, rather than, fighting against polluting power plants, which were disproportionately impacting the health of Black communities. So, the environmental movement has come a long way for sure. And I think in moving forward, there just needs to be this recognition that, as the clean energy movement transitions to clean energy, that we're not repeating mistakes of the past. So, if we think about, a lot of clean energy technologies, well, we need to think about the entire supply chain of these technologies. And so, cobalt, for instance, is a mineral that is used in lithium ion batteries, which are, one technology that, people are saying we need to be able to transition away from combustion engine vehicles. And so, well, we need to look at where is this cobalt coming from? Well, a lot of it is coming from the Congo, and we've seen evidence of unsafe mining practices and child labor and unfair wages and a lot of these issues, and we just can't turn a blind eye to. And so, I think when we think about the Black Lives Matter movement, and for so long, I think environmentalists were sort of focused on environmental issues and not looking at these other social issues which are connected. We just need to make sure that we do better moving forward. And there's actually this new platform that I recently came across, started by someone named Leah Thomas. It's called Intersectional Environmentalist, and really highlighting this need that environmentalists need to be intersectional in order to succeed. And so that's largely what the piece that I wrote was about.
Well, I think if you look at the climate movement, I think first off, with the COVID and the pandemic, there was a lot of, okay, well, look at these big actions that are occurring. Maybe there's lessons to be learned. And then Black Lives Matter came along. And I think I think the climate movement is, how do you not take advantage of a situation, but it's like you learning lessons from these really big movement that happen so fast. And I think a lot of us still haven't figured out, what we can do, but there are lessons to be learned. And so I'm sure that's something you're pondering, it's just.
Definitely.
All right. So what's next for you?
Yeah. I mean, I recently transitioned from my job into focusing on Ecologic full time. So really, focusing on that, figuring that out. So it only recently became a registered nonprofit a few months ago. So
Nice.
thank you. Yeah. So really just, focusing on the strategy and the fundraising and the programs and all of that. And obviously we had ideas for what we would do, and then COVID happened. So just adjusting, but yeah, just really thinking about what that looks like, and, maybe writing another play, who knows? And then also you mentioned at the beginning, I am part of the Clean Energy Leadership Institute. I'm on their leadership team doing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So really continuing to work on that. That is another organization everyone should check out, but they are expanding in a few cities and really focusing on their DEI efforts. So yeah, I plan on focusing on my work there as well. So plenty to work on.
Well, I don't know if like Sarah, when we first approached you, but Simpatico is this new platform where we want to have these conversations, and your new organization, Ecologic, extend that offer. It would be great to have you as a regular voice. You're doing a regular show. I don't know if you're talking to me or you're talking to other people, but we have that flexibility. Look at this as a potential platform for you to. It's kind of a ready built for situation. So definitely, consider Simpatico.
Yeah, thanks. Will do.
All right, so this has been fabulous. Again, we just quickly went through the episode, and whatever, even if whatever you're doing with Ecologic, we want to have you back again, and the sequel, that in itself would be a wonderful conversation. But I want you to hold on. We're going to go into the just chatting section just to wrap things up. But thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. I enjoyed it.
All right, we'll be right back. Hold on.